Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and in the absence of any news regarding Godzilla vs. Kong, all we can do is speculate. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do for the next little bit. Now, I already did a video about how I don't think Godzilla is going to suddenly become the villain in this next film, the way so many people seem to think he will be, or perhaps just want him to be, but that's not really the factor I'm talking about right now. Today I'm going to talk about something that may very well help us determine the outcome of who is going to win. The subject of fate. Now, what I mean by that is there are certain things about fictional characters which just sort of need to happen. No matter what you put them through, no matter what setting they're in, no matter what age they are interpreted through, certain things are just always going to happen no matter what. Things like no matter what, Superman will always be one of the last survivors of the planet Krypton, or Batman's parents will always be murdered, or Hamlet will always be depressed and wind up dead along with practically everyone else in Denmark by the end of the play. No matter what happens, some things are just inevitable. And this can also apply to where a character eventually winds up. Some characters are just destined to die. And based on my own observations, I believe King Kong might be one of those characters. I think he is an inherently tragic figure, and part of that tragedy is that he is destined to fall. At the very least, that perspective is true when you look at him through the American lens. When he's reinterpreted in the Japanese films, that isn't necessarily the case. But we're focusing on the American ones here because, quite frankly, that's what the MonsterVerse Kong seems to be based on more than anything else. In particular, the classic 1933 version of Kong. The original 1933 version of King Kong is a tragedy. Specifically, the tragedy of a king who was knocked from his throne, sold into slavery, and eventually killed. It's just that the king happens to be a giant gorilla, and his kingdom was a prehistoric island filled with dinosaurs. Even so, that's the main gist of the story. Kong is meant to be a tragic figure. He is the ruler of his domain until strangers come in from some foreign land and decide he's not king anymore, they're the kings, and they're gonna put him in his place and treat him like the animal they view him to be. And, of course, when he tries to flee, they wind up killing him because, well, they just can't have him escape, now can they? Now, of course, it's not all that uncommon for a monster to be killed at the end of a monster movie. Heck, killing the monster is a tradition that predates movies in general, going all the way back to Greek mythology at the very least. But even so, that tragedy is an inherent part of King Kong's story. You can't really remove that. I mean, a monster like, say, Dracula, or the Frankenstein monster, or the Wolfman, or even Godzilla, you can kill them at the end, but there's always that possibility that they won't stay dead. And indeed, often are the times that those creatures come back for more. But King Kong is different. When King Kong dies, he's dead. It's very rare to see him come back. And that, of course, was before people decided to increase the tragedy by having him not just be a fallen king, but also the last king. Nowhere in the original film does it ever say King Kong is the last of his kind, mind you. That part came about later as we learned more and more about primates and that they are very social creatures, so it would be very unusual for a solo primate to be out in the wild. Unless, of course, there were no other primates for it to socialize with. So King Kong's tragedy has only increased the further along we've gotten. Heck, there's little room for interpretation in Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong, in which we see the great ape pass by rows upon rows of skeletons, all of which are his ancestors, and he's the only one that's left. Like I said, this adds to the tragedy. Not only is Kong the king who has been stripped of his power and treated like a common animal, he's also the last of his kind, so with him goes the wonder of an entire species. And indeed, even on those rare occasions where King Kong doesn't die at the end, there's still always that lingering thought that he could, and that when he does, that'll be the end. That was present in Kong Skull Island as well. Kong is very explicitly stated to be the last of his kind. There are no other Kongs left, much like in Peter Jackson's version, except this time they were all wiped out by the Skullcrawlers. Kong is it. It's implied, of course, that there are other monsters out there in the Monsterverse that are also the last of their kind, but for some reason, this is only applied to Kong as a specific point. Then again, that reason could very well be obvious. It could be foreshadowing. It is very hard to look at these different elements and not see it as Kong being set up to fall as he has in the past. True, he gets his triumphant ending in Kong Skull Island, but it still comes with that caveat of how it won't last forever. That's one of the exact lines from the movie. Nothing lasts forever. Shown as we see Kong mourning his parents. Now, I'm sure some people might listen to this and think, wait a minute, fate has nothing to do with this. This is a new interpretation with a new universe, and there's nothing saying that this version of Kong has to die. They can do something different. They're not beholden to what's happened in the past. And yet, the prevailing mindset among people who saw Godzilla King of the Monsters was that they all pretty much expected Mothra to die, because dying is what Mothra does as well. Isn't that one of the prevailing arguments? People can't be upset that Mothra dies because Mothra always dies in these kind of movies, or at least more often than not she dies. And of course there's the chance that she'll come back because that's also part of what she does. We can even apply this to the human characters. Dr. Serizawa has now fulfilled his destiny of dying in a sacrificial move that saves the world, eerily paralleling what happens in the first movie, just with a slightly different outcome than in 1954. It's clear that the Monsterverse is looking to the past, even as it brings its characters in new directions. And with that in mind, it seems difficult to believe that King Kong will win, because he is destined to fall. Of course, what that could actually lead to, I don't know. It is possible for Kong to lose without being killed, just as it is possible for Godzilla to lose without being killed. At this point, we genuinely don't know what's going to happen. We don't even know what tone the movie is going for yet. And we don't know which monster, if either of them, will be cast in the antagonistic role, though I still highly doubt it's going to be Godzilla, because I actually paid attention during King of the Monsters. But we will find out, if and when we ever get that trailer. Feels like it's taking forever. I mean, I'm enjoying the break and all, but still, you gotta give us something, Warner Brothers. Anyway, that's just something I've had floating around my mind for a little bit. I don't know what's gonna happen in Godzilla vs. Kong any more than you do. But I do have my suspicions, and based on the evidence, I still can't really say I think Kong has much of a chance. So naturally, I'm still Team Godzilla. But is that really a surprise? Well, you're free to leave your thoughts on my thoughts and whether or not you think I'm onto something in the comments section below. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.